They told us the prophets were pale men from faraway lands, speaking to strangers about foreign gods. But that is not our truth. That is not our story. The prophet Isaiah walked among his people in the city of Jerusalem, a city rooted in Africa's soil, shaped by its kings and crying out through its prophets. This was not a cold, distant man with detached visions. This was a black prophet, born in a time of turmoil, called to stand in the fire and speak life to a broken people. And today his voice still echoes, not from stained glass windows, but from the spirit of our ancestors who knew that they were chosen long before the world tried to erase their name from the book. Isaiah's turbulent time, a prophet born in crisis. The days were dark when Isaiah was born. Kings were falling, empires were rising, and Judah trembled between loyalty to God and fear of the nations. He lived through the reigns of 4 kings, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, a sign that his message would span generations. The political tension was unbearable. Nations like Assyria threatened invasion, and the leaders of Judah scrambled for survival. Yet in the midst of this chaos, Isaiah's voice arose, not from fear, but from fire. His calling wasn't about predicting the weather of geopolitics. It was about revealing the temperature of a people's soul. The Bible grounds his prophetic mission in this historical tension. Isaiah 1:1 opens with a clear timestamp. The vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah son of Amoz saw during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. These were not random names. Each king represents a season of moral decline or renewal, and Isaiah was there to document and influence each turn of the nation's heart. His voice became a thread holding together a fragile society torn between covenant and compromise. Historically, Judah stood at a crossroads of African and Middle Eastern influence. Egypt and Cush, mighty black empires, bordered the region, and trade flowed through African lands into Jerusalem. The kings Isaiah served were not unfamiliar with African power. In fact, Hezekiah would later seek alliance with Egypt. Isaiah 30:1-3. But Isaiah warned against trusting man more than God. His message, deeply rooted in an African geographic world, called for spiritual loyalty in a time of political desperation. Spiritually, the era mirrored our modern times. Confusion, instability, and people seeking answers in all the wrong places. Isaiah did not speak to a foreign people. He spoke to his own, people who looked like him, who knew the same streets, who shared the same traditions. And still, many would not listen. But he kept speaking because the truth couldn't stay silent. His words were not just for kings, they were for the soul of the nation. And when we see Isaiah as a brother, a black prophet from a land connected to our own ancestral roots, his story becomes a mirror. We are not outsiders looking in. We are the inheritors of the very legacy he lived. Our communities, too, have lived through corrupt leadership, foreign threats, and spiritual decline. But like Isaiah, we rise with truth in our mouths, vision in our spirits, and a call on our lives that cannot be silenced. Isaiah's perseverance across 4 reigns shows us the strength of black endurance. His story tells us that God doesn't call the comfortable, he calls the committed. And when he does, he places them exactly where they're needed, in the center of chaos, to speak life. Isaiah's presence across decades was not a coincidence. It was a divine placement, an assignment for a time when only the bold would survive. As we look around today, the world may appear just as divided, just as shaken by fear and politics. But the same God who raised up Isaiah in turbulent times is still raising up truth speakers in our generation, many of them from the same lineage the world has tried to forget. Africa has never been forgotten by God. Neither has its children. So let's keep walking through Isaiah's world, because the more we understand his time, the clearer we'll hear his voice. And his voice is not just ancient, it's alive. In us, in our stories, and in our fight to remember who we are in God's eternal plan. Isaiah's life in Jerusalem, a prophet shaped by culture and covenant. Isaiah didn't just pass through Jerusalem, he was born in it. He lived its rhythms, breathed its air, and walked its temple courts. This wasn't just a city, it was a living covenant between God and his people. Imagine growing up surrounded by the echoes of David's songs and Solomon's wisdom, watching incense rise from the temple built by your ancestors. This was Isaiah's upbringing. He wasn't raised on foreign scrolls. He was shaped by sacred tradition. Every corner of Jerusalem was a sermon, every feast a lesson in divine identity. Scripture doesn't detail every day of Isaiah's youth, but it gives us clues. His deep knowledge of the law, his poetic mastery, and his connection to royal figures like King Hezekiah point to an educated man familiar with court life and temple rites. In Isaiah 1:10-15, we see him speak with authority to the leaders and priests, challenging their rituals without righteousness. He knew the system, not as an outsider looking in, but as a son of the soil, a man rooted in the very fabric of Judah's sacred traditions. Jerusalem, during Isaiah's time, was more than just a capital. It was the spiritual heart of Africa's northern front, a place shaped by its proximity to Egypt and Cush, its alliances with Canaan and Libya, and its descendants of Ham who helped build its legacy. The city bore witness to African presence long before foreign conquests rewrote its narrative. Isaiah's presence in Jerusalem is a testimony that prophetic authority did not come from Rome or Greece. It came from a covenant born in African soil, nurtured by black lineage, and spoken by voices like his. Spiritually, this grounding gave Isaiah a unique authority. He didn't speak about God from theory. He spoke from memory, from experience, from intimacy. He saw the rituals, heard the priests chant, watched people come to worship and leave unchanged. And that broke his heart. Because what use is tradition if it doesn't touch the heart? Isaiah's Jerusalem upbringing gave him eyes to see not just the beauty of the temple, but the brokenness behind its doors. And that reflection resonates deeply with our journey. Many of us grew up in church, surrounded by gospel, tradition, and heritage. Yet not all of it transformed us. Like Isaiah, we've seen the rituals without the righteousness. We've witnessed praise without purity. But God calls those who know the culture to challenge it, not with condemnation, but with conviction. And that's what Isaiah did. His life proves that knowledge of tradition should not lead to pride, but to purpose. Isaiah didn't use his education to boast. He used it to build bridges between truth and transformation. He shows us that black excellence in the faith doesn't begin with seminary degrees. It begins with surrender, with being so rooted in God's truth that your voice can shake temples and awaken kings. As we walk through Jerusalem in Isaiah's footsteps, we are reminded that our history with God is not borrowed. It is blood-bought. We were there. We are there. The streets he walked still whisper our names, and the covenant he defended still calls out for our people to rise again in truth. Let's keep pressing in, because what Isaiah saw in Jerusalem was only the beginning. His voice would soon thunder against injustice with words that still strike the soul today. Injustice exposed, Isaiah's outcry for the oppressed. Isaiah didn't just see the corruption of kings. He saw the cries of the poor, silenced beneath gold-covered floors and marble walls. His voice was not for the elite, but for the afflicted. In Isaiah 5:8, he cries out, Woe to you who add house to house, and join field to field, till no space is left, and you live alone in the land. This was no vague poetry. It was a precise rebuke of the wealthy landowners who were stealing the inheritance of the poor, forcing families off their ancestral land, and turning covenant community into capitalist empire. Isaiah lifted his voice like a trumpet, calling out the systems of greed that devoured the soul of the nation. He was not afraid to confront those in power. In Isaiah 1:23 he says, "Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They all love bribes and chase after gifts." These are not soft words. Isaiah was fearless, a prophet of fire. He didn't ask for approval from the palace. He didn't wait for an invitation from the temple. When he saw injustice, he named it. And in doing so, he stood in the tradition of Moses, Amos, and Jesus, all of whom fought for the voiceless against the cruelty of systems that crushed the people. Historically, this outcry aligns with what we know about ancient Judah's economic oppression. Wealth was being centralized in the hands of a few, while the masses suffered under taxation, land seizure, and manipulated religious systems. It mirrors what happened across African kingdoms colonized and divided, where land was taken and power was sold to foreign rulers. Isaiah's fight wasn't just spiritual. It was political, social, and deeply African. He spoke from a world that understood land, legacy, and lineage, and what it meant to have all three stolen. Spiritually, Isaiah's cry reminds us that righteousness is not just about personal piety, it's about justice. A nation can sing praises and still be in rebellion if its systems are soaked in oppression. God wasn't moved by Judah's burnt offerings. He wanted their hearts, their honesty, their hands clean from blood. In Isaiah 1:17, the prophet delivers God's instruction: learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. That is the gospel in action. That is what holiness looks like in public. And for our people, this truth hits home. We too have watched as the rich grow richer and the poor disappear from the map. We know the pain of displacement, of neighborhoods erased, of opportunities denied. But Isaiah shows us that speaking out is not rebellion, it is righteousness. To cry for justice is to echo God's own voice. Our cries are not complaints. They are a continuation of a prophetic legacy born in black soil. This message isn't just about the past, it's about our prophetic role today. Black voices must continue to rise, not only in worship but in justice. Isaiah teaches us that faith without justice is a lie dressed in religion. But when the two walk together, systems tremble and the oppressed rise in dignity. As Isaiah's words thundered across Judah, they carried the sound of truth echoing through time. He wasn't silenced because truth doesn't die, and neither will we. Our voices are born of the same fire, the same urgency, the same call to righteousness. So, as we continue, listen closely, because Isaiah's next battle was not just with injustice, but with the idols that tried to take God's place. Idolatry and the battle for the heart. Isaiah's confrontation with false worship. Isaiah saw something more dangerous than foreign armies and corrupt kings. He saw a nation losing its heart to idols. Statues of wood and stone could be seen rising in places where the name of the Lord once echoed. Sacred spaces were defiled, and images made by human hands were being bowed to by the same people God had set apart. This wasn't just rebellion, it was betrayal. In Isaiah 44:9-20, he unleashes a blistering condemnation of idolatry, mocking how the same wood used to warm a fire is carved into a god and worshipped. He exposes the insanity of it. that the creation would dare to dethrone its creator. The scriptures make it plain. In Isaiah 2:8, he declares, "Their land is full of idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their fingers have made." He saw a people exchanging glory for vanity, trading covenant for culture, abandoning the living God for lifeless images. But Isaiah didn't just call out the practice. He cried for the people's return. He knew idolatry was more than external ritual. It was an internal rebellion. It was about trust, loyalty, identity. Historically, idolatry was often linked to political and cultural alliances. When Judah formed treaties with foreign nations, they often adopted their gods. Egypt, Assyria, and Canaan brought more than soldiers. They brought symbols. Isaiah saw through this. He knew that beneath the idol was always a lie about power, about protection, about who we are and who we belong to. And in the context of African history, we recognize how foreign powers imposed idols not only in temples, but in minds. Colonial powers replaced God's truth with false religions and whitewashed narratives, turning sacred traditions into superstition and severing generations from their true spiritual heritage. Isaiah's stand reminds us that the battle over worship is always a battle over identity. When people forget who their God is, they forget who they are. And when you forget who you are, you become easy to control. Isaiah didn't just want to cleanse temples. He wanted to cleanse hearts. His fight against idols was a fight for the soul of his people, a call back to the truth that their strength, safety, and future came from God alone. For us, that battle still rages. Idols may look different today: fame, money, politics, self. But the lie is the same, that something other than God can define you, save you, complete you. And like Isaiah, we are called to tear down those false altars, not just in public, but in private, in our own hearts, our homes, our communities. Because when black people know who their God is, they awaken to who they are: chosen, powerful, holy, and free. Isaiah's voice reminds us that we were never made to bow to what we create. We were made to walk with the one who created us. His fire against idolatry is the same fire that burns in us today, a holy rage against every lie that says we are less than what God declared. This rage is not destruction, it's restoration. It clears the land so truth can rise again. So let the idols fall, let the truth rise. Because Isaiah wasn't finished, his next message would challenge even the strongest, exposing the danger of trusting in human strength instead of divine protection. False security. Isaiah's warning against trusting in military alliances. There's a subtle kind of idolatry that doesn't bow to statues. It bows to strategy. Isaiah saw his nation placing their hope not in the hand of God, but in the armies of Egypt, the horses of Cush, and the political power plays of men. They didn't melt gold into calves, but they melted their faith into alliances. And that, too, was rebellion. In Isaiah 31:1, the prophet cries, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord." Isaiah wasn't just issuing a military advisory. He was sounding a spiritual alarm. Judah was running to the very nations that once enslaved their ancestors, believing that human strength could protect them from divine judgment. He saw clearly what others refused to acknowledge, that trusting in human power while ignoring God's voice would lead to ruin. It wasn't just a bad policy. It was a spiritual disease, fear dressed up as wisdom. Historically, these alliances were rooted in political desperation. The shadow of Assyria loomed large, threatening to crush any nation that didn't submit. Judah, surrounded and afraid, looked south to Egypt. A black nation with a mighty army and an ancient legacy. It made sense on paper, but Isaiah remembered history. Egypt had once enslaved God's people, and now Judah was willingly binding itself to its former oppressor. The irony was painful. The lesson was clear. Survival is not the same as salvation. Spiritually, this message slices through the modern world. How often do we, as a people, run to systems that once oppressed us, believing they now hold our hope? Whether it's political power, economic schemes, or social approval, the temptation remains to place our faith in what is seen instead of who is sovereign. Isaiah calls us to remember that no chariot, no president, no paycheck can replace the protection of the Most High. And for the black community, this truth is fire in our bones. We know what it means to be promised help but handed chains. We've been told to trust systems that never trusted us. But Isaiah's voice reminds us, our help has never come from men. It comes from the hills, from the heavens, from the God who delivers without armies and defends without borders. We are not safe because of alliances. We are safe because we are chosen. Isaiah teaches us that true strength is spiritual. Real security is found in obedience. The most powerful position we can take as a people is on our knees before the throne of God, not in fear, but in faith, because when God fights for us, no enemy can stand. So as Judah looked to Egypt, Isaiah looked to heaven, and his words rise even now. The Egyptians are men, not God. Their horses are flesh, not spirit. Isaiah 31:3. That word still lives. That warning still stands. And that choice between flesh and spirit is still ours. And just when the nation seemed deaf to his warnings, Isaiah had an encounter that would change everything. A vision so holy, so majestic, it would burn away all doubt. A vision of glory, Isaiah's encounter with the living God. It happened the year King Uzziah died. A time of mourning, uncertainty, and fear. The throne on earth was empty, but the throne in heaven was not. Isaiah 6:1 begins with thunder. I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. The most powerful man in Judah had just fallen, but Isaiah was about to see the king who never dies. This vision shattered everything he thought he knew. The glory was not theoretical. It was overwhelming, alive, holy. It wasn't politics. It was presence. The scripture paints a scene beyond comprehension. Seraphim hovered above the throne, each with 6 wings, 2 to cover their faces, 2 to cover their feet, and 2 to fly. And they cried out, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah 6:3. These were not gentle angels. These were fiery beings declaring God's unapproachable majesty. The doorposts shook. Smoke filled the temple. Heaven was not quiet. It was alive with the power of holiness. And Isaiah was not just watching. He was undone in its presence. Historically, this vision occurs during a critical national crisis. King Uzziah had reigned for over 50 years, a symbol of stability and prosperity. But in his pride, he violated the temple and was struck with leprosy. 2 Chronicles 26:16-21. His death marked the end of an era. Judah was vulnerable, and the people were disoriented. But in this moment, God recentered Isaiah's vision. Earthly kings may die, but God remains. He reminded the prophet and us that divine authority is not shaken by human failure. Spiritually, this vision is what awakens the prophet inside the man. Before Isaiah could speak for God, he had to see God, and not the God of theory, but the God whose holiness burns, whose glory shakes foundations, whose presence reveals everything hidden. This is the God our people have always known, the one worshipped in Ethiopian cathedrals, sung to by Nubian warriors, called upon by enslaved ancestors in the midnight hour. Isaiah's vision was not exclusive. It was ancestral. It was prophetic. It was for us. This moment also reminds us that divine encounters are not reserved for the elite. Isaiah was not a priest or a king. He was a man of unclean lips. But God still revealed himself. This vision was not to elevate Isaiah's ego. It was to break it. And in that breaking came the building. God is still giving visions to those the world overlooks, still revealing himself to sons and daughters who carry the blood of prophets in their veins. For the black community, Isaiah's vision is a reminder that our heritage is not just historical, it's holy. We come from a people who have always sought the face of God, even when the world tried to chain us down. This vision is not just about awe, it's about access. We serve a God who shows up in glory, in power, in truth, and when he shows up, everything changes. Isaiah entered the temple as a man. He would leave as a messenger. But first, there was fire, there was cleansing, there was transformation. And in that moment, the course of history shifted. Because when God calls a voice, he always precedes it with vision. And so, the stage was set. But before Isaiah could speak for God, he had to be purified. And what happened next would mark him forever. Purified by fire, the seraphim, and the cleansing of the prophet. No one stands before the throne of God unchanged. When Isaiah saw the glory of the Lord, he didn't shout in celebration. He collapsed in confession. "Woe to me," he cried in Isaiah 6:5. "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." This was not false humility. It was holy terror. The light of God exposes everything. And when Isaiah saw God, he saw himself. Not his title, not his education, but his need, his impurity, his unworthiness. And that was exactly where grace would meet him. Then came the fire. A seraphim flew to him, holding a live coal taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched it to Isaiah's mouth, saying, "Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Isaiah 6:7. This was no ordinary ritual. It was a supernatural purification, a burning away of the old so the new could rise. The same mouth that once declared, "I am unclean," would now declare the word of the Lord to kings and generations. It was not talent that made Isaiah a prophet. It was transformation. This act echoes the ancient rituals of temple worship, where fire represented purification, sacrifice, and divine presence. But this fire didn't consume, it healed. This altar coal carried the power of God's mercy, and it reminds us of the African traditions, where fire often symbolizes both judgment and rebirth. Across the Nile and through the hills of Cush, the fire was respected as sacred. Isaiah's cleansing aligns with that ancient understanding. To be truly alive in God, something in you must first die. Spiritually, this moment speaks to every soul who feels unworthy, broken, or disqualified. God does not wait for us to be clean. He makes us clean. He doesn't call the perfect. He perfects the called. That fire is still burning. That mercy is still available. And to our people who've been told we're unworthy, unseen, unholy, this is our promise. The altar is for us too, and the coal still cleanses. This truth should ignite deep pride in our spiritual heritage. We are not spectators of holiness. We are participants. Isaiah, a son of Jerusalem with roots in African soil, was not rejected by the fire. He was remade by it. His lips were once impure, but they became the instruments of divine prophecy. This is what God does with the ones he chooses. He purifies, he prepares, he sends, and there is no shame in being broken before God. That's where the power begins. Isaiah's cry of "Woe is me" is the gateway to "Here am I." And for every believer who has ever felt too damaged to be used, Isaiah's story says otherwise. Fire does not disqualify you. It equips you. This moment reminds us that the call of God doesn't come to those who think they are clean. It comes to those who know they're not, but are willing to be touched. The coal burns, yes, but it also frees. And Isaiah would never be the same, because once your lips have been touched by fire, your voice can never again be silent. Here am I, Isaiah's prophetic call and bold response. After the fire came the voice, not a shout, not a demand, but a divine invitation. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Isaiah 6:8. The throne of heaven was calling, searching for someone who would carry its message. And before the question could finish echoing across the temple, Isaiah answered not with fear, but with fire in his bones. Here am I, send me. This was not a hesitant offering. It was a full surrender. A man touched by glory could no longer live for comfort. He had been claimed. And he knew it. This is one of the most iconic callings in all of Scripture. It reveals a powerful truth. God doesn't force his servants. He invites them. Isaiah was not drafted. He was drawn. And though the path ahead would be filled with rejection and sorrow, he accepted it with joy. Because when you've seen God, nothing else compares. When you've been forgiven, you can't remain silent. Isaiah didn't ask for a map. He didn't demand a guarantee. He just said yes. In the ancient world, prophets often faced brutal consequences: exile, imprisonment, stoning. This was no small commission. Isaiah's yes meant he would challenge kings, confront priests, and be hated by the very people he loved. But in the culture of Jerusalem, a city surrounded by African nations like Egypt and Cush, the prophet's courage would shine all the brighter. His yes was not just personal, it was historical. It aligned him with a long line of black voices who said yes to God in the face of danger. From Moses to the Ethiopian eunuch, from the Queen of Sheba to Simon of Cyrene. Spiritually, Isaiah's response is a model of obedience for every generation. When God calls, he's not looking for the most polished, the most perfect, or the most praised. He's looking for those who are willing. And willingness is worship. It's what separates the religious from the righteous. In a world where many hear the call, but few respond, Isaiah's example shows us the power of a surrendered heart. For our people, this moment is a mirror. We are not a people without purpose. We are a people of calling. For centuries, our ancestors have been hearing the same question: whom shall I send? And responding through music, movement, resistance, and revival. Here am I. From the underground church to the civil rights pulpit, from the mission fields of Ethiopia to the slave fields of the Americas, black voices have been answering the call for generations. Isaiah's yes gives us permission to rise, to say yes to the hard things, yes to the truth, yes to the Spirit, yes to the path that may not be easy, but is always holy, because to be sent by God is not just a mission, it's an identity. You walk different, you speak different, you carry fire. And once Isaiah said yes, there was no turning back. His destiny was sealed, not with applause, but with assignment. He didn't just witness glory, he became a vessel of it. But what came next would test even his strength, because the message he was sent to deliver would not be welcomed. The weight of the message. Speaking to a hardened people, the fire had cleansed his lips. The voice had commissioned his soul, but now came the cost. In Isaiah 6:9-10, God gives him a message that would break most men. Go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. God was sending Isaiah not to a people ready to receive, but to a people already hardened. His mission was not to reap a revival. It was to deliver the truth to hearts that refused to listen. That's the weight few prophets talk about. The truth is heavy when no one wants to carry it. This passage has puzzled many, but its meaning is clear. Isaiah was being sent as a witness against a rebellious generation. His words would not soften their hearts. They would reveal their resistance. His ministry would feel like failure to the eyes of men. But God had never called him to popularity. He had called him to obedience. Isaiah's life wasn't measured by results. It was measured by faithfulness. Historically, Judah at this time was deeply entangled in religious ritual, but spiritually disconnected. The temple rituals continued, but justice was forgotten. The leaders upheld tradition while ignoring the cries of the poor. This kind of hypocrisy was deeply embedded, and Isaiah's message threatened the foundations of a corrupt system. In African history, we've seen this same pattern. Truth-tellers silenced, prophets imprisoned, revolutionaries erased. Isaiah's struggle was not new. It's the ancient war between light and darkness, justice and power. Spiritually, this assignment teaches us that the measure of success in God's eyes is not numbers, it's obedience. Isaiah would preach, and most would not change. But his faithfulness would plant seeds for future generations. His words would one day comfort the exiled, strengthen the remnant, and point to the coming Messiah. Sometimes your no today becomes someone else's yes tomorrow. Isaiah didn't preach for applause. He preached for the remnant. And for the black community, this truth is deeply familiar. For generations, we've cried out truths that the world refused to hear about justice, dignity, identity, and faith. We've spoken in churches, in courtrooms, in classrooms, and on street corners. And often the ears remained closed. But like Isaiah, we preach anyway, because even when the people are hardened, the Spirit still moves. Isaiah's courage speaks to those who feel discouraged in their calling. When your voice seems ignored, your prayers feel unanswered, and your message feels rejected, you are not alone. Isaiah walked that path, and still he remained faithful. That's power. That's legacy. That's what it means to be called. Because in God's kingdom, the message matters even when the people refuse to hear it. And Isaiah's message wasn't just about judgment. It was preparing the world for the greatest hope that would ever come. So as the cities emptied and the hearts grew cold, Isaiah's eyes looked forward, beyond the ruin, beyond the silence, toward restoration, judgment and hope. Isaiah's prophetic duality of destruction and restoration. Isaiah did not flinch when delivering judgment. He spoke of cities laid waste, houses abandoned, and fields devoured by strangers. Isaiah 6:11-12. His words struck like thunder, warning Judah of what would come if they refused to turn. And true to the prophecy, exile did come. Babylon would take the people, burn their cities, and tear down the temple. But even as Isaiah declared destruction, he planted seeds of restoration, because God's judgment is never the end. It's the doorway to healing. For every word of warning, there was a whisper of promise. That promise is woven through Isaiah like golden thread through a mourning cloth. In Isaiah 11:1, he declares, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit." Even when the tree of Israel seemed dead, God would cause life to spring from what was cut down. That branch was not just a metaphor. It was a man, the Messiah. Isaiah was not just prophesying exile. He was pointing to Emmanuel, God with us. Isaiah 7:14. The same voice that warned of judgment also announced salvation. Historically, this dual message mirrored the experience of many ancient African kingdoms. Empires rose and fell. Cities flourished and were destroyed. But the people endured. In Ethiopia, in Nubia, in the Coptic churches of North Africa, the faithful held on. Even when colonizers rewrote history, the truth remained in the bones of the people. Isaiah's message reminds us that while systems may fall, the promises of God cannot be erased. Destruction may visit the land, but restoration belongs to the remnant. Spiritually, this speaks directly to us. We have known exile through slavery, segregation, oppression, and silence. But Isaiah reminds us that judgment is not rejection. It is purification. It is the breaking before the breakthrough. For every woe to you, Isaiah also declared, "Comfort, comfort my people." Isaiah 40:1. The same God who allows the storm also prepares the sunrise. And that hope is not abstract. It is eternal. It is Jesus. And for our people, that hope is identity. We are not defined by suffering, but by survival, by the promise that God always leaves a seed. Isaiah 6:13 says, "As a terebinth and an oak leaf stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land." That seed is us. We are the continuation of the story, the evidence that God preserves, restores, and raises up his chosen people through every fire. Isaiah's voice continues to thunder and whisper justice and mercy, judgment and healing. His duality reflects the complexity of our own journey. We weep, but we rise. We mourn, but we build. We are pressed, but not crushed. Because our foundation is not in nations, it is in the Word, and that Word never fails. So let Isaiah's vision be your reminder. You come from a legacy that cannot be erased, a prophetic people, a holy seed, a voice in the wilderness that still prepares the way. Family, if this story stirred something in your spirit, don't let it stop here. Share this truth. Speak it in your homes, post it on your page, and pass it on to your children, because our people must know that we were never an afterthought in God's plan. We have always been central to his purpose. Like Isaiah, we are a holy seed, chosen to stand, to speak, and to rise. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the God See channel, and turn on notifications. Because these truths are life, and our community needs to hear them. Stay strong, stay rooted, stay holy. God sees you, God chose you, God is with you.